Elvira always hated mirrors. Not because they lied, but because they told the truth. She lived in the grand estate of Blackthorn Manor, a house filled with golden chandeliers, marble floors, and portraits of ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow her every move. But none of it mattered, none of it ever did, because in this world, beauty was everything. And Elvira was not beautiful. Her stepsister, Isabella, had skin like fresh cream and hair that glowed like spun gold in the candlelight. People adored her. Lords and noblemen visited the manor just to catch a glimpse of her radiance. The maids whispered about how she could have any prince she desired. Elvira, on the other hand, was always in the background, overshadowed, ignored. Her features were sharp where Isabella's were soft. Her complexion was pale, sickly. Her lips too thin. Even her own mother, Lady Roderica, always said, "Beauty is a woman's greatest power, and yours is a lacking." But Elvira had found something. A book. An old, leather-bound tome hidden deep in the manor's abandoned west wing. Its pages whispered promises of transformation, of perfect skin, full lips, and luminous eyes. All it asked for in return was a price. One night, beneath the flickering candlelight of her chamber, she traced her fingers over the book's inked symbols. She whispered the words aloud. And the shadows in her mirror whispered back. Elvira had always been the lesser one, the overlooked one, the ugly stepsister. It had been that way since she was a child. The townspeople would coo over Isabella's golden curls, pinch her rosy cheeks, and declare her a blessing from the heavens. But Elvira? They barely noticed her. When they did, their eyes would linger just a moment too long, studying her as if trying to find some hidden beauty that never quite surfaced. Her mother, Lady Roderica, had once been a great beauty herself, and though time had begun to pull at the edges of her youth, she still carried an air of cold, regal perfection. It was from her that Isabella had inherited her beauty, a cruel trick of fate that left Elvira with only sharp angles and hollow cheeks. Life at Blackthorn Manor was a constant comparison. Every mirror reflected her flaws. Every banquet reminded her of her shortcomings. Even the grand ballroom, with its towering ceiling and glittering chandeliers, seemed to mock her, as if beauty alone gave a person permission to exist in such luxury. Isabella never gloated. She never had to. The world had already placed her on a pedestal, and Elvira had been made to kneel beneath it. But everything changed the night she found the book. It had been buried beneath dust and time, hidden away in the west wing, the part of the manor no one dared enter. The hallway smelled of damp wood and something older, something rotten. The walls bore deep cracks, as if they had been trying to swallow the room whole. The book sat on a wooden stand, bound in black leather, its edges scorched, as if it had barely escaped the flames. The title had long since faded, but the moment she touched it, the air shifted. A whisper, almost too soft to hear, curled against her ear. "You wish to be beautiful, don't you?" Elvira's breath caught in her throat. She turned sharply, but the room was empty. Only shadows stretched across the warped floorboards, flickering with the dim glow of her lantern. She hesitated, then slowly opened the book. The pages were filled with symbols she didn't understand, written in ink that seemed to pulse as if it were alive. She skimmed the pages, heart pounding. A ritual. A transformation. It required only a few things: a mirror, a candle, and a sacrifice. Elvira's fingers trembled as she traced the instructions. The words claimed beauty could be taken, that it could be transferred, stolen. For the first time in her life, she had hope. That night, she sat before a mirror, the candle's flame dancing against the glass. The room felt colder than usual, the shadows deeper. She whispered the incantation, her voice barely more than a breath. At first, nothing happened. Then, the flame flickered violently, stretching unnaturally high, before snapping out completely, plunging the room into darkness. Elvira gasped, scrambling backward. A soft sound, like fabric dragging against wood, echoed in the silence. And then she saw it. Not her reflection. Something else. A figure just behind the glass, staring at her with hollow eyes. Its mouth moved, forming words she couldn't hear, but she felt them inside her skull, pressing against the walls of her mind. One beauty gained, one beauty lost. A sudden, searing pain tore through her chest. Elvira collapsed, gasping for breath as the room spun. Her veins burned, her skin prickled like fire ants were crawling beneath it. Then, just as quickly as it began, the pain stopped. The candle's flame reignited. The mirror returned to normal. And Elvira felt different. She stumbled to her feet, hands shaking as she lifted the lantern, holding it close to her face. Her skin, once pale and blemished, was now smooth porcelain. Her lips, thin and colorless, were now full and soft. Her eyes a larger, brighter, shimmering like moonlight. She was beautiful. Her heart pounded with exhilaration. The spell had worked. She had finally won. But something felt off. A distant scream rang through the halls, sharp and shrill, piercing the silence of the manor. Elvira froze. The voice, she recognized it. Isabella. Elvira's heart pounded as she rushed from her chamber, the hem of her nightgown sweeping over the cold marble floors. The manor was dark, save for the dim glow of the lanterns lining the halls. The distant scream had come from Isabella's room. As she approached, the heavy wooden door creaked open on its own, revealing a flickering candle inside. The air was thick, stifling, as if the walls themselves had grown too tight. Isabella sat on the edge of her bed, trembling. Her face was hidden in her hands, shoulders rising and falling with ragged breaths. "Elvira," she whispered. Her voice, normally soft, melodic, sounded wrong. Hoarse, unsteady. Elvira stepped forward. "Isabella, what happened?" Isabella lifted her face. Elvira nearly stumbled backward. Her sister's beauty, her flawless, ethereal glow, was gone. Her skin looked sallow, almost gray, her once perfect lips chapped and peeling. Her golden hair, always gleaming in the light, hung in limp, lifeless strands. But worst of all were her eyes. The irises, once shimmering blue, had dimmed, like a candle about to be snuffed out. "I feel sick," Isabella whispered. "Something's wrong." Elvira swallowed hard. She knew exactly what had happened. The ritual had stolen Isabella's beauty and given it to her. She should have felt guilty. She should have been horrified. But instead, she felt triumphant. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the ugly one. Still, she forced a look of concern. "You should rest," she murmured, guiding Isabella back onto the bed. "You've been overexerting yourself." Isabella nodded weakly, her once radiant features now hollow, almost unrecognizable. Elvira turned down the lantern and left the room, closing the door behind her. She should have stopped there. But she didn't. The next evening, as she gazed at her reflection, her perfected reflection, she felt an insatiable hunger. What if she could be even more beautiful? What if she could take more? The book sat beside her mirror, its pages curling slightly as if breathing. She ran her fingers over the cover. The words from the night before echoed in her mind. One beauty gained, one beauty lost. Her mother, Lady Roderica, had once been the most beautiful woman in the region. Though age had dulled her glow, she still held traces of her former splendor, high cheekbones, piercing eyes, and elegant stature. And Elvira wanted it. That night, she repeated the ritual. The candle's flame shuddered violently before going out. The shadows in the mirror shifted, writhing like something alive. "You wish to take again," the whisper came. "Yes," she breathed. A sharp pain tore through her once more, her skin burning, stretching, reshaping. She gasped, gripping the edge of the vanity as the world blurred. Then, silence. The mirror was normal again. Elvira slowly raised her head. Her features were now even more refined, her skin impossibly smooth, her eyes strikingly sharp. She was breathtaking. And down the hall, a thud echoed. Elvira rushed toward the sound. In the grand parlor, Lady Roderica had collapsed beside the piano, her hands clutching at her chest. Her once elegant face looked gaunt, her features sunken. Her beauty had been stolen. "Elvira," she rasped, her voice barely above a whisper. Elvira hesitated. Should she call for help? Should she stop? Then she caught a glimpse of her own reflection in the parlor mirror. She had never looked so beautiful. A slow, creeping smile spread across her lips. She turned away from her mother, leaving her gasping on the floor. Blackthorn Manor was silent. Too silent. Elvira stood before the grand ballroom mirror, her fingers tracing the flawless reflection before her. She had never looked more perfect. Her skin glowed like porcelain, her lips full and red, her once dull eyes now shimmering like polished jewels. She was irresistible, exquisite. And yet something was wrong. The air felt thick, pressing against her chest like a weight she couldn't see. A whisper, faint, almost imperceptible, curled through the stillness. "Elvira!" She turned sharply. Behind her, the shadows in the mirror moved. Not a trick of the light. Not her own reflection. Something else. The surface of the mirror rippled like water, and from its depths, a shape emerged, a twisted, grotesque figure, crawling forward on elongated limbs. Its face... Elvira's breath hitched. It was Isabella, but not as she had once been. Her sister's form was distorted, her once perfect skin cracked like porcelain, her once golden hair now wisps of withered straw. Her lips, cracked and split, stretched in a too-wide smile, a grotesque mockery of beauty. "Elvira!" Isabella's voice rasped, her head tilting at an unnatural angle. "Give it back!" Elvira stumbled backward, her perfect features twisting with horror. No, you're not real," she whispered. But the thing in the mirror moved closer. From the hallway, another voice, hoarse, broken. "Elvira!" She turned. Lady Roderica stood in the doorway, but her beauty was completely gone, her skin withered, her lips sunk inward, her hair thin and white like the brittle branches of a dying tree. And beside her, more figures appeared. Dozens of them. All of them grotesque. All of them hollow, drained. Servants. Maids. Guests of the manor. She had taken from them all. The whispers grew, rising in a chorus of accusation. Give it back. Give it back. Give it back. Elvira clutched her face. No, I earned this, it's mine. The shadows tightened around her. The mirror rippled violently. Then it shattered. 1,000 shards of glass exploded outward, but instead of falling, they hung in the air, twisting, forming a jagged, gleaming maw. A hand shot out of the broken surface, thin, clawed, wrong. It grabbed Elvira's wrist. And then it pulled. She screamed as the mirror sucked her in, her body twisting unnaturally as she fought against the inescapable grip. The whispers screeched, a deafening crescendo of vengeance. The last thing she saw was Isabella's face, grinning too wide as the darkness swallowed her whole. Then, silence. The air stilled. The broken glass settled. The figures in the hall slowly faded. And in the mirror, a new reflection. Elvira was still there. But her face was no longer beautiful. Her skin was cracked, her eyes sunken, her lips stretched into an eternal, silent scream. She had become what she feared most. She had become the ugly stepsister. Blackthorn Manor stood as it always had, looming, grand and timeless. But something had changed. The great ballroom mirror, once pristine, was now a fractured relic. The servants dared not touch it, for when they gazed into its depths, they swore they saw movement, a shadow shifting just beyond the cracks. Lady Roderica, though frail and diminished, recovered. She never spoke of what had happened, never questioned why her beauty had drained away so suddenly. But she no longer looked at mirrors, not once. And Isabella. Her radiance returned slowly, like sunlight creeping through the winter frost. She never questioned why her health and beauty had been restored. She only knew that Elvira was gone. The official story was simple. Elvira had vanished, leaving behind only the shattered remains of the ballroom mirror. Some believed she had fled in shame, consumed by jealousy. Others whispered darker theories, that she had lost herself to something unnatural. But late at night, when the house was silent, Isabella would sometimes pass the grand mirror and feel the air shift. A faint scratching noise would echo from the glass. A whisper, so soft, so fragile, would slither through the cracks. Isabella. She never stopped to listen. She never looked too closely. Because sometimes, just for a flicker of a second, she swore she saw Elvira's reflection, her once perfect face twisted in anguish trapped, forever clawing at the glass. And so, the days passed. Seasons changed. The manor continued on as if nothing had happened. But the mirror remained, and Elvira's reflection never faded. On the coldest nights, when the wind howled through the halls of Blackthorn Manor, the servants swore they heard it, a faint tapping against the glass, like fingernails desperately scraping for escape. No one dared to look, because those who did never saw their own reflection staring back. They only saw her,